Dear friends, welcome back to Automate with Rakesh. Now, our next topic in the advanced UI automation is automate virtual environments using remote runtime. Now, for this, I am going to recommend the topic Advanced UI Automation with Studio in the UiPath Academy, where you would get entire details around this specific area. In this topic, you will learn around the remote runtime. So if you look at the description, do you want to learn how to create automation solutions in a virtual or remote desktop environment? Then the Advanced UI Automation Studio course is for you. In this course, you are going to learn UiPath extensions, UiPath remote runtime, building a remote automation, and web driver protocol. Now to help you understand this topic, I have created a simple presentation which is going to help you understand this topic quite well. Now let us get started. Now in this particular topic, you are going to learn three important areas. One is UiPath extensions, UiPath remote runtime, web driver protocol. For this video, I'll be covering the very first part, which is UiPath extensions. Now all of us at least have used the Google Chrome extension for our web automations, and these options are available in the UiPath Studio. If I go back to my UiPath Studio and click on Home and click on Tools and click on UiPath extensions, you can see all these extensions are available, starting from Chrome extension, Edge extension, Firefox, Java, Silverlight, Citrix, Microsoft RDP, Excel add-in, SAP Solution Manager. Now I have a question for you. Why we use these extensions? What is the need of installing, for example, UiPath Google Chrome extension? Now the answer is quite simple. It enables the UiPath softwares to interact or communicate with various applications in various environments. Now, for example, on my studio, I have used a use browser and I have indicated the rpachallenge.com. And here, let's say I would like to use a click activity, which is supposed to click on a given particular area. For example, if I click on indicate in Chrome, and I'm going to select the submit button where I would like to click. Now, if I do this, what happens the moment I click, if you look at my screen, collecting target information, searching the target, right? All of these things are happening automatically. So it is collecting the selector information, and you can see it has already collected. The moment I hit on confirm, and all this job is done by the extension. And the extension has now sent the data in the property of this application. For example, if you scroll down this property, for example, the target property, and click on the fuzzy selector or the selector, you can see all this information which are actually collected by the extension and been sent to UiPath Studio. Now to brief it, the UiPath extension collects the selector information, action, it takes action on the execution part. When we run it, it takes action. It can also help you to extract data and many other functions that are highly required for the UiPath Studio or the UiPath robot to function or to interact with the application. So what we have really understood is the extensions are the key area or the key components that enables UiPath softwares to interact or communicate with various applications in various environments. Now, if I ask you, how do you really install these UiPath extensions? Now, one of the simple ways, you go to the studio, click on Home, and click on Tools, come to UiPath extension and install what you need, right? Whichever is required, you can go ahead and install it. This is one way. There is also another way that is known as setup extension.exe. It is a command line utility I'm going to show you practically. Now to find this, open Windows R or Windows Run prompt, and here simply type percentage local app data percentage and hit on enter. Now this will take you to the app data local location. Now here I'm going to look for programs folder, and then I would look for UiPath. Then I will look for Studio, and then inside this I'll be looking for UiPath once again. Let me click on this, and here there is something called setup extensions. Using this you can also install extension. Do you know how? Let me show you practically. Now for this I'm going to open command prompt, mostly in the administrator, run as administrator, and I'm going to click on yes. Once your command prompt opens, all you have to do, you have to go to that particular folder. So you have to write change directory, and let me open that folder and let me copy the path. And here let me enter this. Okay. The moment you do this, it entered into the path. Now I need to run the setup. If you remember the name, it is setup extensions.exe. Now just to verify that, you can always check the folder. So in the folder setup extensions.exe, now hit on enter. The moment you do this, it gives you certain commands, right, using which I can do it. I can install, for example, if you look at this Chrome, okay, let me enlarge it. So if you write /Chrome installs UiPath extension for Chrome per user only if it is not installed per system. Chrome Global, install UiPath extension for Chrome per system. Okay, like that, there are multiple different options are there. Now how to utilize it, let me show you. Now the first thing I'm going to type is setup extensions.exe, and I'm going to write Chrome. Okay, if I'm going to hit on enter, you can see it gave me a prompt. If you want to continue installing the UiPath extension for Chrome, please close all your Chrome processes, then click OK. So that means it is already installed. It is already installed on my system, so I don't want to install it again, but I showed you the demo. So let me cancel this. Okay, the installation was cancelled. Okay, so this is one way of utilizing the UiPath extensions. Now, as you have understood this, I am going to frame few questions on the very first topic, UiPath extensions, and let's see how many of you can answer these questions. Let's face some questions around the UiPath extension. Now, the very first question, what are the different methods available for installing or uninstalling UiPath extension in UiPath Studio? What are the different methods? Your options are A, only through the Home Tools UiPath extension menu in the UiPath Studio. B, using setup extension.exe tool in the installation directory. Are you aware of this? C, both through Home Tools UiPath extension and using setup extension.exe tool from specific installation directory. D, exclusively through the command prompt using the setup extension.exe. Now pause this video. Comment your answer. You can comment like question 1, answer is A, B, C, whatever it is, right? So comment your answer. Okay, I hope you have commented the answer. Let me reveal the answer. The answer is C. We can do it. We can install the extension using the Home Tools UiPath extension option in UiPath Studio, and also by using setup extension.exe. Now for this demo, if you haven't seen, please watch the previous video. You will see the entire demo, how you can install using setup extension in the command line. Let's move on to our second question. What is the primary purpose of UiPath extensions in UiPath Studio? This appears a very simple question. Options are to enhance the appearance of the Studio interface. Option B, to enable native detection of UI elements in various applications and environments. C, to provide additional coding functionalities within Studio. D, to facilitate cloud-based storage and collaboration features. Now you know what is the right answer. Please do pause the video and comment your answer. I hope you have already done it. So let me reveal the answer. The answer is B, to enable native detection of UI elements in various applications and environments. Okay, so this is the right answer. In this video, we will try to solve this question. We will also understand various important points around this topic. This topic around remote runtime could be a new topic for you. I'm going to explain everything in detail from the scratch. Now let's read the question. Which of the following examples correctly demonstrates the appropriate usage of remote runtime for automating virtual environments in UiPath project? The question is quite simple. But again, if you do not have knowledge around remote runtime, you may not be able to pick the right answer. Now let's see what is remote runtime starting from the scratch. Now to explain you remote runtime, I have created a couple of images through which we will go through in this video, and you will be able to get an understanding of UiPath Remote Runtime. Now the very first thing, we need to understand how UiPath extension work. For example, on my laptop I have UiPath Studio and I have opened my target application. Now what I do, I drag and drop a click activity, indicate, and what would happen, you have installed a browser on your Chrome. Let's say this application is opening in Google Chrome. So this extension, what it does, a command is sent to the extension first, right? Second, extension works in the current environment. So it allows you to select the element, let's say submit button. The moment I select, what happens, the extension sends, job of the extension is to information gathering. So it will gather all the selector information and then it sends to your UiPath Studio. So now after you have selected the element and clicked on verify and OK, what happens? All the selector information are now stored in the property of that activity. And behind the scene, what worked is the UiPath extension, right? This UiPath extension helped in gathering this information. Now this much concept is quite clear. Now let's move on. Next thing, UiPath Studio and the target application both were running on the same laptop. Yes or no? Both of them are running on the same laptop. You are indicating and going back to that application and selecting the selectors. Both were running inside the same laptop. Now, in a remote desktop scenario, remote desktop means what? A different desktop is running on your laptop, right? Let's say this application is actually running on a remote desktop. Now here what happens, UiPath Studio running on your laptop, but the target application is running in the remote desktop or the virtual desktop or Citrix environment. It is running in a different desktop, in a remote desktop. It is not running on your computer. There could be any client application which are secure, which should not be open on your laptop. It should only open in a VDI, virtual desktop. Now you know so many such applications. Now let's say this application is running on a remote desktop. Now in that case, the real challenge comes. The real challenge comes. I'll tell you what is the reason behind that. Then we'll come back to the slides again. Now this chapter, the chapter name is Advanced UI Automation with Studio. Here you have Introduction to UiPath Runtime. I'll go through these important points. Very important for the exam. Okay. Building a remote automation. Selectors are crucial part of building automations. We know it. In UiPath, they rely on underlying property of user interface elements like buttons, text boxes, right? Labels, and work great when identifying application elements such as buttons, text fields, etc. when automating native system. So UI automation, that means user interface automation. UI automation means in your studio, if I open my studio, in my studio, you know that all these activities, let's say click, get text, are part of UiPath.UI automation activities. So this UI automation does work great when it comes to your desktop or the local applications. Okay, this point is clear. Now selectors, however, break down when trying to automate the same application over a remote desktop protocol. Very important point. Now the same application, if you're opening it in remote desktop, then the selectors will break down. The selectors won't work. Okay, and what is the reason that it doesn't work? This is because, very important points I'm highlighting, will be helpful for your exam. This is because an RDP connection is essentially an image of remote desktop that is being streamed on a client machine. Very important point. So when you are opening a RDP, you are just streaming the remote desktop, right? It is just an image of the remote desktop. Image, this word is very important. Image of the remote desktop that is being streamed on your machine. Client machine means your machine. Remember this. This is what you will get. Client machine means your machine. So when you are opening a RDP or a VDI or a Citrix VDI or a VMware or Microsoft RDP, you are opening that on your client machine, on your machine. However, this is just an image. What you see is an image of the remote desktop that is being streamed, like you stream YouTube, right? The same thing happens. This means that there are simply no selectors that can be identified in such environment. When it is just an image, you can't identify selectors. So this understanding this element is very important, okay? This particular points. This means that there are simply no selectors that can be identified in such environment. So in RDP, you can't identify. Now to address this issue, UiPath offers the following solutions. What are the two solutions we have? One is AI computer vision, which we have seen our previous chapter. And the second solution is UiPath runtime. So what is a runtime? I'm going to show you. Okay, we'll go through the documentation, but I would show you what is a runtime. Now for this, what you do, open your cloud, your orchestrator, and there you would find a question mark here. Click here and go to downloads. That would take you to resource center. Okay, so I have an enterprise license, so it is taking me, but you try this out. So you will be taken to resource center. Now in the resource center, there is something called remote runtime installer. Okay, now the moment, let's say if you click on this, it is going to download a file. Do you see? So there are different versions available. Remote runtime, V23, V22, 22 like that. So these are all compatible with different version of UI automation activities. That is a separate topic I will talk. But again, from here you can install. Now once you download, this is how it is going to appear. You can see UiPath remote runtime.msi. So this is the MSI file we need to install in the remote desktop. You have to open the login to the remote desktop and you need to install this UiPath remote runtime.msi. Now, before we go through the explanation on UiPath Academy, I have created an image which is going to help you. Now, what happened? You have your client machine or your local machine, your computer on your laptop, right? What you do, you have to log into that remote desktop and then install this particular file that you have downloaded. You need to transfer it to that and install this UiPath remote runtime. Now, what this remote runtime, there are a couple of other processes, but again, for a basic understanding, what we have done right now, we have downloaded that UiPath remote runtime.msi and we need to install that in the remote desktop. Now what would happen, this remote runtime.msi will, the job of this will become to gather information gathering and send to extension. It will gather the selector information that is actually running in the RDP, and those selector information will be sent to the UiPath extension that is there on the client machine. And then the UiPath extension is going to write it in the properties. Getting it? So when this application was running on the same laptop, it was quite easy. The UiPath extension was able to handle it. Right now, we are simply installing the UiPath remote runtime component. It's a component that we have installed on the RDP. Now, because it is there inside the RDP, inside the virtual desktop, it can collect the information of that application, the selector information, anchor information, all of those. Now it can send those information, right? It will send those information to UiPath extension. They are all connected. It will send, and then your UiPath Studio will collect those selector. So this image will give you that idea of how they are communicating. So the moment you hit on click here in your studio, the UiPath extension will get activated. Now that is going to send a command to the UiPath remote runtime MSI, which is there inside the RDP. Then it understands what to be done. It allows you to select the element, and then it will collect those information, right? Gather those information and sends back to UiPath extension, and UiPath extension will go and populate it in the local studio as a developer. Okay, so on the developer laptop or the studio, you will get all the information. Now let us have a look on we will go through this how to install, that is the second part. But first of all, understand what is a UiPath remote runtime. Okay, UiPath remote runtime is a component. See, very important point, is a component which facilitates the communication between, important point, a remote application, okay, communication between what? A remote application and a corresponding UiPath extension. So it enables the communication between the remote application and the corresponding UiPath extension. Now, what is that UiPath extension? What is that application? I'm going to show you. I will show you how to install this UiPath runtime. Practically it is not possible because I don't have a RDP, but we'll go through this second set of steps, okay, in the next video. But this is understood, right? So it acts as a component which is going to help communicate between the remote application and corresponding UiPath extension. So what kind of communication? What it does? It gathers information about the targeted UI elements of the remote application. Very important point. And sends them to the corresponding extension. If you remember these 2 points, you'll be able to answer. So the selectors are natively generated on the client machine where Studio is installed. This way, selectors are generated without having to rely on OCR. So here we are not using OCR. Very important point. We don't use an OCR technique like computer vision. Here the technique is very simple. UiPath Runtime MSI is installed on the RDP machine, and that is collecting the information and sending it to the corresponding extension. Pretty simple. We saw that in the image. Now let's answer this question. Okay, which of the following examples correctly demonstrate the appropriate usage of remote runtime for automating virtual environments in a UiPath project? The very first option, using remote runtime to seamlessly interact with UI elements on virtual machine. Correct? UI elements on virtual machine where traditional selectors may not be reliable. So this is the right answer. We'll go through the other 3 why they are wrong. Utilizing remote runtime to execute a UiPath script. You are not running any UiPath script or on a virtual machine while running the main UiPath Studio application on local machine. So here the remote runtime concept is coming because the main application is running inside the virtual machine, not the local machine. So this itself is wrong. Next, applying remote runtime to encrypt and protect sensitivity. No, it is not about encryption. So this itself is wrong. Employing remote runtime to run and debug a UiPath project on a local machine while simultaneously monitoring its execution. No. This is also absolutely wrong. So the right answer is this one, using remote runtime to seamlessly interact with UI elements on virtual machine where traditional selectors may not be reliable. And where you found that answer? By reading this paragraph, right? Because the traditional selectors do not work. They work on when the application is running on the desktop system, but when the application is running in the RDP, that doesn't work. That is where this thing has come, UiPath runtime. This we have learned from this particular paragraph. Okay, so we got the right answer. Let's move on to our couple of questions around the things that we have learned now. I'm going to frame few questions. Check your knowledge and comment your answer, okay, in the next video. Let's go through some of the questions on the remote runtime introduction part. The very first question, why do selectors fail when attempting to automate an application running in a remote desktop protocol? In UiPath, okay, if application is running inside a RDP, why do selectors fail? Pretty simple question. Options are RDP connections lack the ability to transmit selector information. Possibly. Option B, selectors are encrypted in RDP streams, making them inaccessible. Option C, RDP connection is essentially an image of the remote desktop that is being streamed on a client machine. Selectors break down when trying to automate. D, selectors are intentionally disabled in RDP environment for security reasons. Now, out of this, which is the best answer? Couple of options could seem right, RDP connection lack the ability or selectors are encrypted. So all these options might sound right, but what is the best answer that you feel out of this 4? So take your time, pause this video and comment your answer for this question. What do you think? Okay, I hope you have already commented. Let me reveal the answer. The answer is RDP connection is essentially an image of the remote desktop that is being streamed on a client machine. Selectors break down when trying to automate. This is the best right answer. This one is coming from Advanced UI Automation with Studio in this topic, building a remote automation. Here if you see, the UI elements work great when identifying application elements such as buttons, text fields when automating native desktop systems. However, break down when trying to automate same application over a remote desktop protocol. If it is running inside the RDP, it breaks down. And what is the reason given? This is because an RDP connection is essentially an image of remote desktop. See, image of remote desktop that is being streamed on a client machine. That is why that answer was correct. Let's move on to our second question. The second question, how does UiPath Remote Runtime aid in selector generation for remote application in UiPath Studio? Basically, it is asking how does UiPath Remote Runtime helps to generate selectors. Options are by directly identifying selectors within the RDP environment. Does it directly identify? Through the OCR based generation, does it use OCR on the client machine? C, by enhancing image recognition capabilities on remote desktops. Image recognition, does it work on that? Or option D, it collects UI details from remote apps and forwards them to matching extension on the client machine. Okay, here one word is missing, on the client machine or the local machine where the developer is using the studio. Now, out of all this, which is the right answer? Now pause this video, comment your answer. Doesn't matter whether you go right or wrong, continue to comment. I hope you have already commented. Now let me reveal the answer. The right answer for this, it collects UI details from remote applications and forwards them to the matching extensions running on the client machine. So from where I got this? Now if I scroll down, here there is something called UiPath Remote Runtime. Here it tells you clearly it gathers information about the targeted UI elements of remote application and sends them to the corresponding extension, right? So the selectors are natively generated on the client machine where Studio is installed. So the UiPath runtime.msi file gathers the information from the RDP, all the UI element information, and then it sends it to the corresponding extension. Okay, so this is the right answer. I hope you have already answered all these questions correctly. Now let's move on to our next topic. Now let's attempt one more question in the professional practice test. How do you properly configure UiPath Remote Runtime for use with Citrix virtual apps and desktop? Pretty simple question. How can you configure? The question is about configuration. Now, before we go through these options and select the right option, we must understand a couple of terms. If you see, these options have got client machine. It says install remote runtime component on the Citrix application server. That means remote desktop. What is a client machine? All these terms must be clear. And I'm going to show you a couple of important steps in this video. So let's get started. On my screen, I have made a graphical representation. So this is the laptop. Let's say it is a studio developer laptop. Okay, this is the developer laptop where he has opened UiPath Studio. So the UiPath Studio is opened in the local machine, and the local machine can also be called as client machine. So the term that if you hear client machine, imagine as a developer, your laptop is a client machine. Okay, client machine or local machine, like that. Now RDP, remote desktop. That means you are opening a remote desktop and you are running some application inside that remote desktop. So if you go to Studio, Tools and UiPath extension, you can see there's an extension for Microsoft Remote Desktop and apps. Runtime plugin for automating Microsoft Remote Desktop. If an application is running on Microsoft Remote Desktop, then you'll be using this particular extension. If an application is running on a Citrix virtual desktop, then you'll be using the Citrix runtime. Okay, you need to install this. If you are using a VMware, so these are different vendors of a remote desktop or a virtual machine. There's a VMware, right? If you're using VMware VDI, then you have to install this. These are the three important extensions for the virtual desktop, or you can call it as remote desktop, virtual desktop, remote desktop, VDI, remote server, Citrix remote server. That means these are the, it is talking about these different virtual desktops. I hope by now you got an understanding of what is a remote desktop, remote machine, Citrix server, VDI. Also, you got acquainted with the term client machine or local machine. Okay. All right. Once you're fine with those terms, now let's understand how will you configure UiPath Remote Runtime. There are 4 steps. First, you will download the UiPath Remote Runtime MSI file, and then you can download it on the client machine, that means on your laptop, and then you can transfer it to RDP, or maybe in the RDP itself you can open and download it. I'll show you from where you can download. 2. Install in RDP VDI. After download, you have to install that MSI file. I will show you. Third, install the corresponding UiPath extension on client machine. This step also I'm going to show you. Fourth, copy paste UiPath automation activities package from client machine. This is also I'm going to show you. Now let's move on to the very first step. Download UiPath Remote Runtime.msi. Where will you find it? How will you download? Let me show you. If you are a cloud user, then all you do, you can click on this question mark and download. Right? If you're using on-premise orchestrator, then you can go to your customer portal. There is something called customer portal for each partners, right? Each client, there is a customer portal. You can log into customer portal and then download. So here, as I am using Automation Cloud, I'll click on this question mark and then I see downloads. I'll go to downloads. It will take me to Resource Center. And the third option is also you can contact their support. You can contact the support and they would also pass the file to you. Now here, remote runtime installer is something you will find. This is the UiPath remote runtime. Now there are 3 different versions available. Version 23, version 22, version 22.10, 22.4. Now what is this all about? Now how do you understand which one you should pick? Shall I go with enterprise version 23 or this or this? Now for this, if you read the second line, it says compatible with following versions of UI automation 23.4. So these are the different numbers given. Compatible with 22.4.8, compatible with 22.10.5. So only these particular versions are compatible. You cannot go with 10. For example, if I'm downloading this, I must be having UI automation. These are the options for you. You cannot have any other version outside of it. Okay. Now, for example, let me open my UiPath Studio. First of all, I will check what is the UI automation activity I'm using. Now, you can, let's say I want to use the latest one that is available on the cloud, which is version 23. And let's say I'm using 23.48, or maybe I will be using 20.48, or maybe 20.105. So depending on the version of UI automation activity that you're using, you can understand which one you should go for. Okay. Sometime it might be possible I might be using 22.10.6 instead of 5. Then I must downgrade myself to 22.10.5. So how will I do it? In the studio, I'll go to official, and here I'm using 22.4.8. Let's say I have to use 22.4. something else, right? So I'll say UiPath dot UI automation, and here if you select this, you have the option to choose which one you like to go for. Okay. So for example, I'm using an older one. I'll take an example of 22.10.5. Let's say I'm using 22.10.5. So what I will do, I'll first select here 22.10.5. Okay. And I'm going to update. If I update, it will automatically get updated. That means if I'm using 22.10.5, which version of MSI file I should download? I should download this one. Okay. I should download this one. So select this and it will automatically download. Okay. Now once it downloads, you go to your downloads folder. You see it is getting downloaded, but again I have downloaded a couple of prior to that I've downloaded. So if you double click on this, okay, this is what the window would come. Now after you download, let's say I'm downloading it on my laptop, for example. Okay, let me cancel it. So let's say I'm downloading it on my local laptop. Then I need to pass it. Either you transfer it in some different means to your RDP machine, right? So once you transfer, then you double click on this. Okay. And then here is the option to accept and then install. Pretty simple. Pretty simple UI. It is going to install the UiPath Remote Runtime. Only thing you should be very important point based on the UiPath. Say yes. Okay, let me cancel it. So what is the important point here? Whatever your UI automation is there, based it because it is there is a dependency. Your UI automation activities package version has to match with the enterprise version. Okay, this is very important point. It has to match. So whatever is mentioned accordingly, if I'm downloading this, then I should be using any of these versions. So the matching is important. Okay, so first thing you have understood that how to download the required UiPath Remote Runtime and then transfer that file. If you're downloading it on the local machine, transfer the file to the RDP machine and double click and run it. This is one way. Okay, so first thing you have done is the very first step is installing UiPath Remote Runtime. So the very first step of how to download UiPath Remote Runtime MSI file has been clearly explained. And how do you, after you download, how do you transfer to RDP machine? Now the next step, install in RDP. So installation also I have shown you. Double click and install it. Pretty simple one. So download and installation is done. Now the third thing, install the corresponding UiPath extension on the client machine. Now which extension it is talking about, you need to understand. Which is the extension that you have to download? Let me show you. Now for this, go back to your studio, click on home, go to tools. Now remember, you have to first determine the remote desktop that you are using from which vendor. Is it from Microsoft? Then install the Microsoft Remote Desktop and Apps. This is the extension. If it is from Citrix, you need to install this one. On the local machine, on the client machine, that means on my laptop as a developer, I must install these extensions. Okay, if I am using a VMware Horizon, then on the client machine or on my laptop, on the developer's laptop, I must install the VMware Horizon. So these are the three different options: Citrix, Microsoft Remote Desktop Apps, and VMware Horizon. So the third step, install the corresponding UiPath extension on client machine. I think this should be pretty clear with you. Now the fourth step, copy paste UiPath.UiAutomation.activities package from client machine to RDP machine. This is something very important. Let me show you. So here I am on the advanced UI automation with Studio, and I am here in this session. Okay, introduction to UiPath Remote, and here there's a step called installing the UiPath Remote Runtime. Now what we have done, first you need to download. The very first step was download, and these are the different options. You can go to the customer portal, you can use the resource center by click on the help button, right? And or else you can click approach the technical support. So these three options we have learned. Now how to install it? Pretty simple. You double click on it, right? You first run the UiPath remote.msf file to install the UiPath remote runtime. It needs to be installed on, remember, this is important. It needs to be installed on all the Citrix application servers or VMware Horizon servers or the Windows Remote Desktop. So this I have told you. So depending on the virtual machine that you are using, you need to install the remote runtime inside that virtual desktop, inside the RDP. Okay, very important point. Then what they are saying, after you have installed, log off from the client. That means just simply do a restart, log off, sign off, sign back, sign in back, or simply restart that machine. Okay, so the changes will take effect. After you have done this, then the third step is to install the corresponding UiPath extension on the client machine. So I showed you that if you're using VMware, then you must install which one? This, if the question comes, okay, if you are using VMware, then you should install the VMware Horizon. If I'm using Microsoft RDP, I should install this. If you're using Citrix, install the Citrix. So that is the third point. Log off from, once you restart or log off, install the corresponding UiPath extension. Okay, this is important point. Okay, done. Now the same thing you can do it from the command prompt by going to that MSI file and double click and apply this command. This is not very important, but just for your knowledge, command from the command prompt, this is how I can install it. Now if there is a question which is the right command, probably remembering this makes sense. Okay, if there is a question, so better to have just look at it. Okay, look at it and remember and go before the exam. Otherwise the other steps remain the same. Okay, so the two ways, either you are installing it using the UI user interface or through the command line prompt. Okay, these are the two options. Now, this one is very important point, guys. The UiPath Remote Runtime has a dependency on the version of UiPath UI Automation Activities package. Okay, this is very important. This is a separate topic I will cover. But right now, for this question, we have already discussed how to configure. Now let us read these four options and select the right answer. So the first one, install the remote runtime component only in the client machine. Is it right? Wrong. Right? You have to install it in the Citrix application server or the RDP or the VMware. So second option, install the remote runtime component on the Citrix application server, correct? And configure a direct connection to UiPath Studio. How do you configure direct connection? You have to install the UiPath extension for that. The corresponding extension on your client machine. Now let's read the third option. Install the remote runtime component on Citrix application server, correct? And the corresponding UiPath extensions on the client machine. So this is the appropriate answer. As per the documentation, this is the appropriate answer. Okay, install the corresponding UiPath extension on the client machine. Right, this is the right answer. So that's why I told you, going through that documentation in the academy. Fourth, install the remote runtime component on both the Citrix application server. And no, you don't install in both. You have to only install in the VDI, Virtual Desktop RDP or VMware. And then install the corresponding. So this is the right answer. So for 25th, the right answer is this one. Now, the next topic that I'm going to come up is around the UiPath dependency. Okay, UiPath automation activities. But before that, let's answer a few questions I'm going to prepare on the topic that we have learned now. In this video, let's go through some questions around the UiPath remote runtime configuration. So let's see the very first question. What steps are involved in installing the UiPath remote runtime? So it is asking what is the right sequence of steps. Option A, download the installer, run the MSI file on the target server, and install the corresponding extension on the client machine. So this appears like a right option. However, you need to choose the best answer out of 4. Okay. A. B. Request the installer, log off from the client machine and run the MSI file on all remote machines. Okay. C. Access the resource center, log in, download the MSI file and install on Citrix server. Option D. Download the installer, run the MSI file on target servers. That means RDP machine. Log off, log in the remote session after you install, then you log off and install the corresponding UiPath extension. Now, if you have gone through my previous video, you can easily answer this question. If you have got the understanding, you could really answer this question. Now pause the video and comment your answer. Okay, I hope you have already commented your answer, which is the right one out of this. So let me reveal the answer. The answer here is this one, D. First you download the installer and then you run the MSI file on the target server. Then you log off and log in back in the remote session or restart and install the corresponding UiPath extension. This you can find from this particular step of advanced UI automation. From the installer, first you install it, right? You run it. It needs to be installed on all Citrix application server or VMware Horizon or the Windows Remote Desktop machine. Now after that, log off from the current session on the client machine and log back in. That means on the RDP you need to restart, log off, log out, like that. This is required so that your changes take effect. Then you install the corresponding UiPath extension on the client machine. So this is the right answer. All right, now let's see the second question. Which command is used to install the UiPath remote runtime component from the command line? After you have downloaded the MSI file, from the command line, how can you install it? That is the question. So here are a couple of options given, A, B, C, D. Now this question you may or may not be able to answer unless you remember this command. So here the command is add. Let me reveal the answer. The answer is add local equals to remote runtime task. Now let me show you practically. Now this command is available in the academy from the command prompt. This is the code. Use the following command to install the UiPath Remote Runtime. Now let me show you. Now first thing what we have done, we have downloaded this particular file UiPath Remote Runtime.msi. First you have to travel to this particular location. Okay, so C drive, uses Rakesh, and download. So this is the location where I have downloaded, right? So first thing, how to install, wherever you have kept that MSI file, you have to go to that location. Then I'll open command prompt by typing cmd, right click, run as administrator, say yes. And in this window, you have to first write change directory and go to that specific location wherever that MSI file you have kept. So here I've kept it in downloads. I'm going to downloads, hit on enter. After that, after this, you have to copy paste the command from the academy. So here I'm going to copy this entire command and go back to the CMD and paste it. So here you can see add local equals to remote runtime task. Now the moment you hit on enter, it will go to that location and open that particular file. You can see the installation file has opened. All you do is accept and hit on install. It's going to install it. Okay, that's simple it is. Because I'm doing it on my local system, I have cancelled that installation. However, it has to be done on a remote desktop, okay, on the RDP or the Citrix server. You need to do it. So the right answer for this was C. I hope this kind of question and answer sessions are helping you to remember, to recall, and to help you understand concepts quite well. So please do comment, keep commenting on my videos, guys. Let's see one more question on UiPath Remote Runtime. Let me read the question for you. What is the effect of using a UiPath UI automation activity package version that does not match the deployed driver version of UiPath Remote Runtime? Okay. Now, in case you are not getting an understanding of the question itself, no worries, I am going to explain everything from the scratch. So let's get started. Now here I am in the advanced UI automation with Studio and I am in this section, remote runtime dependency. Now I will read through this paragraph and also I would explain you in the Studio. The sentence says, the UiPath remote runtime has a dependency on the version of UiPath automation activities package. Very, very important sentence. What it says, the UiPath runtime.msi file has a dependency on the version. So it depends on which one, UiPath.automation.activities package. What does that mean? If you open UiPath Studio, your UiPath Studio, look at the projects tab and check what is the version of UiPath.UI.automation.activities. So the UiPath remote runtime depends on the version of this particular activity package. Okay, important point. Now, not on the version of UiPath Studio. It doesn't depend on the UiPath Studio robot version. It depends on package, the version of the package. Okay. Now, what does that mean? I'll show you. What you do, go to your orchestrator. Now here you would find a question mark, the help section, click on it and then click on downloads. Once you do this, you will come to something called resource center. Where would you come? You will come to resource center. Now here there is something called remote runtime installer. Here I could see there are three different versions at the moment. Version 23, 22.4, 22.10. What it says, compatible. For example, if I try to download this version, this is compatible with following versions of UiPath automation activities or package activities. So if I download this, then it is compatible with 23.4.8 or 22.10.8 or only this one. Okay, you cannot go with 22.10.7 or 5 or any other number. It has to be exactly the same. For example, if you go with this, This is compatible with 22.4.8. Now, if you go with this, this is compatible with 22.10.5. Okay. Now check which version you are using on the studio. Or the alternative way is, based on the availability of the runtime, you check which version to go for. At the end, the version of UiPath automation activity and the version that you have downloaded should match. Now, what is the meaning? For example, in my studio, if I'm going with 22.4.8, so this is my automation activity package. Then out of this three runtime, which one should I select? So which one I'm using? 22.4.8. So check where it is 22.4.8. Then I should select this and download. So it is downloading the second one. So I should go with remote runtime installer, the second one. Now my question to you. Let's say I'll go to manage packages, official, and I'm typing UI automation UiPath dot UI automation. Okay, exactly, you need to type this way. Now let's say if I'm telling you on my studio I will be using 23.4.9. Let's say I'm selecting 23.4.9 and update. Now which version of UiPath runtime shall I use? So what is the version number? Check it again, 23.4.9. Now check it here. 23.4.8 is there. Now here NUS 23 is not there. Here 23 is not there. So that means I cannot go with anyone. Remote runtime installer, any of this won't be compatible with 23.4.9. So what is the nearest thing? If I have to go with 23.4, I should always select the 8. So what I will do, instead of 9, I must go with 23.4.8 update. So this 23.4.8 is compatible with this particular enterprise version of remote runtime. If you click on it, it will download. Getting it? Now, for example, if I put another question, I'm using, let's say I'm using 2020, what is 2021? 2020 NS20 has been deprecated. So let's say I'm using 2022 10.7. Now if I'm using 22.10.7, which version of UiPath runtime enterprise, right? Which one should I select out of these three? So I should select, if it is 22.10.7, 22.10, right? 10.5 is there, right? 10.5 is there. So what should I do? That means none of this is compatible. I should always downgrade it to 22.10.5. So how do I downgrade after update? No, I should go for 22.10.5. Okay, this one I should update. Getting it? Now the question, so this one you have understood how to pick, which one to pick. Now, the important thing you have to do in this step, I will show you. For example, if you want to, this one I have explained you. If you want to build an automation project using UI automation activities package version 22.10.4, you also need to copy the corresponding UiPath dependency from the client machine where Studio is installed on the settings available VMware server or remote desktop application. So what this is talking about, for example, I will explain this sentence. For example, here I am going with 22.10.5. So as per the documentation in the orchestrator, if you are going with 22, remember the number 22.10.5, that means you must install this particular version of, you must download the UiPath Remote Runtime 22.10.5. Okay, now I'll select this. It is getting downloaded. Now the next thing what it is talking, you must copy this 22.10.5 automation package from your given location, and the location is given here. What is the location? Look at this. Let me read it. Now why you have to do this? Interactive selection on the target application does not build correct selectors unless the activities package matches the UiPath remote runtime dependency on the remote machine. That means whichever package you are using on your as a developer, if you're using 10.5, for example, if I update If I'm using 22.10.5, the same package version needs to be copied to the remote desktop. And here is the location been given. To add remote runtime dependency, follow the instruction below. What they are saying, on the client machine, that means on the developer's machine, where the UiPath Studio is installed, navigate to this particular location. So all you do, so this concepts are very important. Let's say I'm typing user profile percentage OK. And then one of the file is .uget, one of the file is packages, and inside that one of them is UiPath. If you see, some versions are already there. Now let's say on my studio I will install 22.10.5. What I'm installing, so here all 22.4, 23 is there, 23 is there. So let's say I'm installing 22.10.5 update. So I'm downgrading, 22.4.8 is there, so I'm upgrading to 10.5, let's say, and I'm going to click on save. Now what is happening, the moment you are making any changes to this particular activity package, UI automation activity package, what would happen in this location, that folder gets created. Okay, so give it few seconds. It is downloading the packages. Downloading packages and dependencies. 2 out of 6 done. 3 out of 6 done. Wait for few seconds. Okay, you can see it is installing all the new package. After some time, you can see it has become 22.10.5. So now my UiPath automation activity is 22.10.5. That means if I go back to that particular folder, what happens? You can see 22.10.5, right? 5 version has been downloaded. Now, if you look at your orchestrator, go back to your orchestrator. So if you see, this number would match. So you are using 22.10.5. So you have to download this UiPath Remote Runtime 22.10.52.8892. If you come here, 22.10.52.8892. Do you see? So what they are saying, you must copy this. Okay. You must show more options. So I must copy this. Okay. Copy the file and you have to put it inside your remote desktop. You have to copy paste. And there's a given location. Okay. So for example, they are saying on the client machine where Studio is installed, that is your developer machine, you must go to this folder, copy the version which corresponds to UiPath UI automation activities package you want to use. So you can see here, because multiple times I've upgraded, downgraded, and all those things I've done. So you have to only copy the required version upon which you are building your automation. So here I'll be building using 22.10.5. The same thing I should copy. I should not copy all the folders. Important, okay? I should only copy this and paste it in the RDP. Understood? Now let's move on. On the Citrix application server, VMware server, or the remote desktop machine, navigate to program files, UiPath remote runtime, packages, UiPath folder, and paste the previously copied UiPath dependency version here. So that UiPath automation package folder, right? This folder. Now this one you have to put it in your remote desktop. You need to go to this particular location, remote runtime, packages, UiPath, and within that folder you have to paste this dependency like it is here, right? It's the same thing. You go in the remote machine. The path is slightly different. There you paste it. That's all they are saying. Okay, now this is very important. You saw, at least bit of practical, what is the file, where is that file, and how to copy that. Okay, now important point here, look at this. Interactive selection on the target application does not build correct selectors. It will not build correct selector from the RDP unless the activity package matches the UiPath runtime dependency on the remote machine. Okay, so that means the developer, whichever package he is using, the same package must be there in the remote runtime. Otherwise, it won't work. That is the meaning. Okay, now let's answer this question. What is the effect of using UiPath UI automation activities package version that does not match the deployed driver version of UiPath runtime? If it does not match, what is the effect? What would happen? It is asking you. Option number one, the mismatched package version would be automatically updated. No, it doesn't happen automatically. Option two, the automation process will continue to execute, but only OCR image recognition activities will function correctly. This is incorrect. The automation process will automatically be downgraded to use supported UI. No, downgrade automatically will not happen. Selectors are not generated and an exception is thrown. Yes, this is right. If you see, interactive selection on the target application does not build correct selectors, it does not create the correct selectors. The answer is selectors are not generated and an exception is thrown as the package is incompatible with UiPath runtime on the server. So the developer is using a different package version and the installed one is different. That is the whole problem. Okay. So the right answer is 57. I'm going to prepare a few questions around this. Let's see how many of you can answer it correctly from the topic that we have learned. In this video, let's focus on some of the questions on the UiPath Remote Time dependency. So let's see the very first question. The very first question is interactive selection on the target application builds correct selectors without considering the activities packages compatibility with UiPath remote runtime on the remote machine. So it is talking about, do you need to consider the activities packages compatibility? So which activity package? UiPath, UI automation activity package it's talking about. Do you need to check the compatibility with UiPath remote runtime or not? Is it true or false? Interactive selection on the target application builds correct selectors without considering. Is it right? Without considering. So what should be your answer? Please pause the video and comment your answer. So let me reveal the answer. The answer for this question is option number B, false. This statement is false. Let me ask you the second question. A developer upgrades the UiPath.UI automation activities package from version 21.10.7 to 22.10.8. Getting it? So 21.10.7 to 22.10.8 for a VMware VDI automation project. So it is talking about the remote desktop or the virtual desktop interface automation project. What is the necessary step the developer should take post upgrade to ensure upgrade of what? Upgrading this UI automation package. Okay. To ensure accurate selector detection from the remote desktop application. Now, what are the options for you? Option A, reinstall UiPath Studio. Do you need to reinstall the UiPath Studio on robot with the updated activity package? B, update the UiPath remote runtime to match the new activities package version on the remote machine. So you were using 21.10.7. Now you are using 22.10.8. If you come to the resource center and click on remote runtime installer, you were using 21.10.7. That means your runtime version was 22.10. This one, right? This one you are running. Now you have upgraded to 22.10.8. That means you have to go with this. So what is the necessary step the developer should take, right? So would you be going with the option B, update the UiPath runtime to match the new activities package version on the remote machine? Option C, copy the corresponding UiPath.UI automation activities package. I have shown it yesterday. You have to go to user profile, .nugget, packages, UiPath. So there you find this package folder, right? In the previous video, I have shown you, and paste it on the remote machine. I mean, paste it on the remote machine. So out of all this, and D is B and C, which is the right option do you think? What are the actions that we should take? Okay, so please do comment your answer. Kindly comment your answer. Do not worry. Think through and comment your answer. Now let me reveal the answer for you. The answer here will be B and C. You have to also update the remote runtime. Also copy the corresponding UiPath UI automation activities package version to the package folder, right? In the remote machine. All right, now let's move on to our question number 3. What are the potential causes for the UiPath remote runtime.exe not initiating in the remote session for a Windows user post a recent installation? Okay, it is not working. It is not after a recent installation. Options are the UiPath remote runtime.msi was installed long ago, requiring a system update. UiPath remote runtime.exe always starts automatically for every Windows user. See, recent installation of UiPath, because you remember, mind this word, recent installation. Recent installation of UiPath Remote Runtime.msi without a subsequent system restart. You have not restarted. We have studied that yesterday, right? After you install UiPath Remote Runtime.msi, you must restart. D. UiPath Remote Runtime.exe only functions upon manual launch by the user. Do you need to manually launch it? Okay. Now, if you know the answer, please do comment. Please do comment your answer. Okay, I'll wait. Please do comment. I hope you have already done it. Let me reveal the answer. The answer is C. Recent installation of UiPath Remote Runtime.msi without a subsequent system restart. Okay, so this is your right answer, guys. So thank you for watching. Let's move on to our next topic. In this video, I am going to explain and show you in practical what is WebDriver protocol and how to use it. Okay, now to get started, I'm going to my studio. The very first thing let me do is, for example, I will use one of the classic activity. Hope you remember open browser, right? Now for this demo, I'm going to show in both classic activity and also using the modern activity. Now, first of all, if you don't see this, enable classic, you'll be able to see this. I'm going to drag and drop this activity. Let's say I want to open the site rpachallenge.com and let's say I want to open it in Chrome. And then let's say I'm using a click activity. Drag and drop. I have to use the classic click activity. So here the classic click activity is this one. And I'm going to click on indicate element. Now, first of all, let me open rpachallenge.com. So which browser am I using? I'm using Google Chrome browser. Okay, I'm using Google Chrome browser. And in that activity, what I have selected? I have selected the browser type as Chrome. Now, the moment I hit on indicate element, what is happening? The extension is working in the background. You see UiPath browser automation 23.10 started debugging this browser. So what is working? Extension is working. So if I select on element, the extension picks up the selector for that element and shows it in the UiPath Studio. Now the question I am asking you, can I automate the browser without the use of extension? What is your answer? Do you answer yes or no? So most of us are familiar with the UiPath browser extensions like Chrome extension, Mozilla Firefox extension, Edge extension, right? All of this we have used. But let me tell you, yes, it is possible without extension. Without extension, I can still automate my web browsers or websites. Now let's see how this can be done. Now you're not using extension. For example, if the same thing I want to open in Edge, my Chrome has an extension. Let me show you. If I go to the Chrome, click on extension, there is a UiPath browser extension is there. The same thing if I open Edge. Now on my Edge, if I go to this extensions, I have not installed any extensions. Okay, manage extensions. I do not have a UiPath extension. Now what would happen if I go back to the studio and try to indicate? So this time I have selected this as Edge. And here I'm going to click and indicate on screen and I'm going to sum. So what is it saying? It cannot communicate with the browser. Do you see? Because your Edge browser doesn't have an extension, so it cannot communicate. So the question here is there an alternative? And I answered you, yes, there is an alternative. And the alternative is WebDriver. What is it called? WebDriver protocol. Using this, I can still do the automation on a browser without usage of an extension or the browser extension. Now, earlier to UiPath, when UiPath extensions and all of these things were not there, These WebDriver protocols were used to automate the web browser or the websites that are running on a given web browser. Now let me show you how I can do it. So I said, yes, it can be done. Now let me show you how it can be done. Now here in this Academy page, it is completely in detail, it has mentioned. So you have understood by now, WebDriver protocol is an alternative to your UiPath browser extension. So what are the different browser extensions that you might have worked on? Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Microsoft Edge browser. We'll go through this in detail, but again, right now, I'm just giving a demo. After the demo, we will go through the text. Okay, what is important for the exam? So these are the three different browsers extension you must have used. Now, WebDriver protocol is an alternative to these extensions. Now, here is the instruction given. Let's say you have to do automation on Microsoft Edge. Then you should click on the link and download the WebDriver protocol. If you're using Chrome, then this is the link. If you're using Mozilla Firefox, this is the link. So let me show it on the Edge. I'm going to click on this link. Okay. So here what we are doing automation without extension using WebDriver protocol. So for that, the very first thing, I've opened the link given here for Microsoft Edge. It opened up this page. Here I see download, click on download, and then it asking you which one. Are you using x64? And there's a version number. And the version number of your browser should match with the version number of this one. Now let me see what is the version I'm using on Edge. I'll go to the Edge, click on these three dots, help and feedback, and there is something called about Microsoft Edge. If I open it, it is 119.021.51. Now let me go back, 119.021.51. So this is the one which is matching. Now what version, 64-bit or 32-bit? It's 64-bit. So 64-bit means I have to go with x64. So click on this button and it will get downloaded. Let me go to the downloads folder. Okay, so step by step I'm showing you. Right click on this, extract all, extract. So it is going to extract in the same folder, in the downloads folder. I've got it, and inside this there is something called msedgedriver.exe. Once you have downloaded, your second step is to open environment variable. Now in case you are not very familiar with environment variables, I won't suggest you to do it. You can just see the practical on my computer and learn from it. I'm going to click on edit the system environment variable and click on environment variable. And so what I did, I opened it from the start menu, edit the system environment variable. After that, this window has come. Let me do it again. System environment, if you type, this is the one. And after that, there's a button called environment variable. I'm going to click on it. And then there's something called path. I will select the path. So the path is in both the places. I'm going to use the user variable for Rakesh. So this is one I'm selecting. Hit on edit. And here I'm going to hit on browse. I'll go to downloads. So you have to locate where that exe is existing. So currently for testing purpose, I've kept it under downloads. So I'll select that folder where the exe is there. Okay, and done OK, and click on OK, and you are done. So now your environment variable is set. Next thing, I'll go here and I'm going to just double click on this particular file. Now if I double click on the file, it says Microsoft Edge WebDriver was started successfully. So it is running now. It is running in your system. After that, I'll go to the studio. Here in this, I will do certain changes. So first of all, I'll select the browser as Edge. The URL remains as it is. The important option is communication method. In this, I'm going to select something called WebDriver. Okay, so it is now not going to use any extension. Anyways, I have not installed extension for Edge. So it is not going to use extension. Rather, it is going to use the WebDriver to communicate with the browser. Getting it? Now, let me delete the click activity for the moment. Now, if you simply by making these two changes, selecting the Edge browser and communication method I've selected as WebDriver, by making these changes, if you simply run it, you will see something different is going to happen. What is the difference? It will appear on the screen very quickly. So what happened? Now, as in Google Chrome, you have seen, right? It was saying when we were doing this, it was saying, right? UiPath browser automation 23 started debugging. So this extension is working on Google Chrome. However, when I open Edge, now it is controlled by what? Microsoft Edge is being controlled by automated test software. So this is your WebDriver. So is it not interesting? It is interesting, right? You can see now it is controlled by the WebDriver. Getting it? Here, if I use a click activity, let's say, and click on indicate element, escape, I have to keep that browser in the backend. Yeah. Now indicate. And now if I click on submit, you can see it is pretty well able to understand different element. That means this software, automated test software, is communicating with the browser and allowing me to select the elements. If I click on submit, what would happen? As the UiPath extension used to collect the selector, the same thing is happening here. Now WebDriver has collected the selectors for me. So what happened? WebDriver has collected the selectors from the website. Exactly, it is working like UiPath browser extension. Okay, getting it? So this is done. Now if I am going to save and run this, what's going to happen is going to automatically open the browser. It will do the automation, the exact automation, but again it is controlled by the test software. Okay, now you can see it has clicked on the submit button. Got it? Now the next way what we will do, we will use this one, the modern activity. What is the modern activity alternative for this? Open use application, right? Use application browser. So this is the modern activity. Now ensure your this option, right? If you newly open it, the newly opened one won't have this one, Microsoft Edge being controlled. Okay, ensure whichever site you are doing, it should have this Microsoft Edge is being controlled by automated software. If you have closed it, then you have to open it using the classic activity so that it opens up like this. Okay, this should be in this is how it should look. Okay, this white bar has to appear. Now once the bar is there, I'm going to indicate the application. I'm minimizing it. Okay, indicate. Now what happens? It is able to communicate with the browser. So it understand. It is able to communicate. Now here what you do, WebDriver mode, I am going to select as with GUI headless. Headless means background automation. Headless means background automation. With GUI I mean with graphical user automation. Okay, graphical user interface automation. Headless means completely background automation. So I will say with GUI, and now I'm going to use the click activity, and here I'm going to click on indicate, and I will indicate the submit button. Okay, so indicate and Edge. So now everything is controlled by this, right? It's okay, fine, I'm fine with that. Confirm. Okay, so here the options are slightly different in the modern activity. In the modern activity, for the use browser, you have to select here saying with GUI or headless background automation you want to do, or GUI. With GUI, if I do and run this, getting it? So you got a very nice concept of WebDriver now. So you can see it has communicated with the browser. So if you keep it open while it is running, you should be able to see it. Okay, you can see it is clicking. Okay, it is working very fast in the modern activity. Okay, now if you want to do background headless means, for example, you don't have to have this visual element open. Okay, for example, if I run this now, the edge is completely closed. Okay, you will see it is going to do the same activity completely in the background. Okay, you can see, and it got executed, see, but the edge is not open. So this is called headless. So this practical is very, very helpful if you haven't seen WebDriver protocol. Now let me go through the academy and explain you a couple of important points. Okay, all right, what is a WebDriver protocol? The WebDriver popular protocol used to automate browsers. Okay, this is to automate browsers It exposes the REST API in a separate executable than browser itself. This protocol is widely used with the actions such as starting a browser, click elements, type into, all kind of browser automation actions or the activity that you do, clicking on, typing into, and all that. In the UiPath platform, the WebDriver protocol introduces support for headless browser automation. So there's a new term, headless. This means that the browser automation don't necessarily have to rely on visual elements. I showed you this demo. Such as window frames, automations are executed in the background. Headless means what? Background automation. Remember this point. Without you having to keep up the browser window, okay? You don't have to keep the browser window open. It will automatically work in the background. Nevertheless, the WebDriver protocol is not strictly meant for headless browser automation and can also be used for operate browser. So both the ways I've shown you, you can use the graphical user automation or you can go for a headless, that is background automation. And this is available with 3 different browsers at the moment: Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Microsoft Edge browser. Automations why the WebDriver protocol does not require you to install the corresponding browser extension. So what we are avoiding here, in case you don't want to use a UiPath browser extension, then you can go with a WebDriver protocol. Got it? But they do require the corresponding WebDriver executable. You have to install that. I've showed you how I have installed the MS Edge driver. Although WebDriver protocol can be used for both headless and visual browser automation, it is not meant to replace UiPath extension. Here UiPath is not saying that you have to replace UiPath. You can giving you freedom to use whichever option suits you the best. You can use any of this. If you're okay with browser extension, go with it. If not, if you want to try the WebDriver protocol, go with it. Selectors are generated by WebDriver protocol are the same as those generated by UiPath browser extensions. There's no difference. Getting it? This applies for both headless visual browser automations, but not Windows frames. Okay, so now these are the important points that you have understood after the demo. Now let's see this. So these are the options I've showed you how to download for each of these browsers. Installing the WebDriver protocol, I have shown you in detail. Okay, how you edit the environment variable, all those steps you have seen it. The same steps are mentioned over here. And these options also I have showed you in the classic activity, right? You have to select the browser and make it as WebDriver. I have shown it in the new modern activities also. Okay, modern activity documentation is not here, but I have showed you how to do it. And here for the classic activity, if you want to go for headless browser, then the hidden has to be enabled. But mostly for this exam, modern activities will be considered, not the classic activities, right? So I have shown both of it for your knowledge. So thank you guys for watching. Now I'm going to ask few questions in the next video. Please do answer them. Thank you. Let's go through some important questions around WebDriver protocol. Now let's see the very first question. What browsers are supported by the WebDriver protocol in UiPath? This one we have discussed. Options A, Google Chrome, Safari, Internet Explorer. B, Mozilla Firefox, Opera, Microsoft Edge. Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Microsoft Edge browser. D, Microsoft Edge, Safari. Now tell me which one is the right answer. Pause this video and start commenting your answer in the comment section of the video. All right. I hope you got the answer. The answer for this question is C, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Microsoft Edge browser at the moment of recording this video. Now moving on to the second question. What is a characteristics feature of the WebDriver protocol in UiPath? Options are requires manual installation of corresponding browser extensions, operates exclusively in a headless mode for all browser automations, C, generates different selectors compared with UiPath browser extension, option D, supports both headless and visual browser automations without relying in browser extension. Now, out of all this, which is the right answer about a WebDriver protocol? Now, pause this video, comment your answer. All right. I hope you have commented the answer. So let me reveal the answer for this question. The answer is D, supports both headless and visual browser automations without relying on browser extensions. So the answer is here in this advanced UI automation WebDriver protocol. Okay, so here, although the WebDriver protocol can be used for both headless and visual browser automation, it is not meant to replace. So this is the line which has created the question for you. Now let's move on to our next question. This question might be slightly tricky. Look at the question. A developer is utilizing the Edge WebDriver protocol. What is using? The Edge WebDriver protocol for an automation project while employing the use application browser activity. So this is the use application browser activity. Which property adjustment enables the execution of automation in the background utilizing the WebDriver protocol? So it is very specific about two terms. The important term is background. The automation should run in the background using the WebDriver protocol. Now here the options are WebDriver mode, headless. So here if you go to the use application browser activity, there's a property called WebDriver mode, and these are the three options for you. So are you going to go with WebDriver mode headless? Are you going to go with WebDriver mode with GUI? Input mode simulate. If you see, there's also input method called simulate. Are you going with the simulate option, or will you go with input mode background? So which is the right option based on the context of this question? So please pause this video and start commenting your answer. All right. I hope you have commented the answer. So the right answer for this question is WebDriver mode headless. So headless is all about background automation. So here you find the proof, documentation proof. In UiPath platform, the WebDriver protocol introduces support for headless browser automations. This means that the browser automations don't necessarily have to rely on visual elements on the screen, such as window frames automations are executed in the background. Automations are executed in the background. So headless is the answer. I hope you have enjoyed these questions and you have commented correct answers for all of these questions. So great. Let's move on to our next topic. Now, as you know, we have been going through this advanced UI automation topic. And in this one, we have seen the demo on how the WebDriver works, a practical demo we have seen. So we are in this third topic of advanced UI automation. In this WebDriver protocol topic, there is also a section which talks around the known issues and limitations of WebDriver protocol or WebDriver automation. So what I have done, there are multiple paragraphs. If you see, for visual automation, there are few paragraphs, and for headless automation, there are few limitations written in the paragraph. What I have done to make it easy, I have created two simple tables. One having limitations of visual automation, the other one having limitation of headless automation. Now making note of this might help you in your exam. Now I am going to discuss each of this point one by one. Let's start with the very first one, which is visual automation. Using WebDriver, we can do two kinds of automation we have seen in our previous video. Now let's understand what are the limitations. The very first limitations is avoid iframes. Now to understand what is an iframe, you can Google that out. Now iframe is, if I read this for you, an iframe is an HTML tag that shows a web page within a current web page. Now this I have demonstrated in my UiPath apps videos, right? How you can use a iframe control to have a page within another page. How can you show a web page inside another page, right? Inside the main page, how can you show one more web page? So that is known as iframe. Now I'm going to explain it here. Selectors for UI elements inside iframes are not validated. If you are using WebDriver, they are not validated. So one point, if you remember iframe, that would help you to recall. It is recommended to avoid iframes when you build your automation project. This occurs when elements identification is done by browser extension and selectors validation is done by the WebDriver protocol. So this is one of the point. So this point you might have understood to avoid iframes while going for WebDriver. The second point, always creates a new browser session. When you are using WebDriver, it will always create a new browser session. Saved cookies and saved browser data are not taken into consideration. If it is using cookies, then you might see some problem during your automation. This is pretty well explained in the second bullet point. A browser automation created with the WebDriver protocol always creates a new browser session. Important point. This means that saved cookies and saved browser data are not taken into consideration. Important point when you build your automation project. Okay. Now let's look at the third point. The third point is selector is not found for a browser with multiple tabs open. So what it says, if a selector is not found for a browser with multiple tabs, if you have kept multiple tabs open, let's say rpachallenge.com, you have opened that in multiple tabs in your browser. The execution constantly switches between them. So there will be some kind of problem you might face, constantly switches between different tabs to see which one is the right one. In this scenario, it is recommended to create your automation project on a single browser tab. So these are a couple of limitations of a WebDriver when you go for a visual automation. While we have covered all these points, let's cover headless automation. Headless automation, in other words, you can say it as background automation. Now there is a problem. If you're using a click activity, type into activity or mouse over activity, something like that, what happens? You have to ensure these activity properties have been set to simulate or send Windows message. Now this is clearly explained here, headless automation by WebDriver. Headless automation does not rely on visual element that we know. As such, the WebDriver protocol doesn't actually open a visible browser window when it is used in a headless mode. It doesn't open a browser window. It will happen everything in the background. Because of this, the headless automation cannot function with some activities which use hardware event in their default state. If you're using dragging and dropping a click activity, by default, it will use the hardware event. It will try to interact, right? They must be configured to use simulate click, simulate type, or simulate hover properties or the send window. Very important point, okay? So for example, here in this activity, if you see use browser activity, I am using the headless, okay, WebDriver mode headless. If I'm using this headless mode, then I have to ensure I am using the simulate click activity for this one. For example, if I come here, then I have to ensure the input mode, right? I have to either go with, by default it will go with hardware event, so you should go with either simulate or else Windows message. Okay, these are the two different options recommended for you. Click, type into, for all of that, this input method needs to be changed to either simulate or Windows message. So I hope the first point is clear. Let's move on to the second point. Interact with images not supported. Now if you look at the second bullet point, activities which interact with images, for example, clicking on image, find image, all those activities are not supported because they rely on browser window itself. So background automation during that, it will not be supported. Only during the headless automation or the background automation, interacting with images are not supported. Third point, event monitoring not supported. So we know there are multiple event monitoring activities. Event monitoring such as click trigger, hotkey trigger is not supported because they rely on hardware events. Okay, this is also a very important point. The next important point is Windows tags not recommended. Now you have to use HTML tags instead. Now remember what is Windows tag? Using Windows tags in the close application activity only closes the browser session and not the corresponding WebDriver process. So what happens? The browser will get closed, but again, it doesn't close the WebDriver session. So it continues. Okay. It is recommended to use HTML tags instead. This is another point. Now the last point, adaptive page layout not supported. So I have written in a very small, shorter format, which might help you to recall. Adaptive page layout not supported. Now what does that mean? When using Chrome or Firefox, the browser window opened by the WebDriver protocol always opens in the same visual space and with the same size specification. Moreover, some websites have adaptive page layout. Adaptive means if the screen size is small, it will automatically adjust all its text boxes, labels, everything according to the size of the screen. And this can lead to invalid selector when the window size is changed. When the window size gets changed, it might lead to invalid selector issue. In this regard, important point. Now, in this regard, it is recommended to use default browser window size when you create your automation. So that time you have to go with the default browser size. So these are a couple of important points. I hope if you make a note of these points before your exam, it might help you to recall and will be able to select the right answer for the question. I'm going to frame a couple of questions based on what we have studied, and let's see how many of you can answer those questions. Let us go through some of the questions around WebDriver protocol limitations we have studied in our previous video. So the very first question, which of the following statement is incorrect regarding limitations of using the WebDriver protocol for browser automation? Now remember, when you get these kind of questions incorrect, that means you need to be very careful, or not true. Okay, sometimes you miss out this is incorrect, you think it is correct, you have to pick. So be very careful about these kind of questions. Option A, selectors for elements inside iframes are not validated, recommending the avoidance of iframes in automation process. Is this statement true or false? B, WebDriver protocol always initiates a new browser session disregarding the saved cookies or browser data. Is it true or false? Option C, when selectors are not found in a browser with multiple tabs, the execution constantly switches between tabs. Is it right or wrong? Option D, creating automation projects tailored for multiple tabs in a browser is advisable for optimized execution. Do you advise multiple tabs when you want to go for a WebDriver browser automation? Now tell me which is the right answer out of this. Comment your answer. Okay, A, B, C or D. What is your answer? Now let me reveal the answer. The answer is creating automation projects tailored for multiple tabs in a browser is advisable for optimized execution. This is a wrong option. Rest A, B, C are correct options. You can find this answer in this particular paragraph, Visual Automation WebDriver. If you go through this paragraph, you will get your answer. Now let's move on to our second question. In headless automation, using the WebDriver protocol, which properties must be configured for activities that use hardware events like click or type into? Now, which property you must configure? I have shown that in the previous video. Here are your options. Option A, ensure the visible property is set to true. Configure the use hardware events property to on. Set the simulate click, simulate type, simulate hover properties or the send windows message property. So you have to set or you have to turn it on. D, enable the headless mode property for the activities. Do you need to turn on the headless mode? Now pause this video, comment your answer. Now let's test your knowledge, what you have learned from the previous video. Please do comment. Is your answer for the question number 2 is A, B, C or D? Okay, I hope you have commented your answer. Let me reveal the answer. The answer for this question is C. Set the simulate click, simulate type, simulate hover property or the send windows message property. Very, very important question on this particular paragraph.